sorry, I'm delighted to be here. And yes, we are recording now. So what we agreed was that we don't want you to ask questions during the recording. And I don't want you to hold your questions till the very end. I think that's unfair. So at various stages throughout this evening, I'm going to stop the recording and then open where people can feel safe asking questions, which are not going to be recorded, if you understand what I'm saying. Okay? So if you have any questions until we pause, just make a note of them and we'll deal with them when we take a pause. Is that all right? Introductions, we're not going to deal with that because we don't really have time, but you're all from social enterprises or not-for-profits, and I've done a lot of work in that area. I've worked with Focus, I've worked with Fluid, I've worked with Rundu Apartments, I've worked with Merchants Key, I've worked with Analifi Drug Project, I've worked with a whole raft of not-for-profit organizations, and obviously a lot of commercial ones as well. In the world of health and safety, where I work, the only area I don't do work in is on building sites. I don't do construction safety because I don't like it, but I do everything else. I do manufacturing, retail, hospitality, hotels, warehousing, all of that, and I do not-for-profit. But I don't do construction because I don't particularly like it. Okay, so now this is what we're going to try and cover. We're going to give, you're not going to be health and safety experts by the end of today because we can't do that in 2 hours, but you will hopefully have an overall understanding of both common law and statute law, what the employers and employee duties are within the 2005 Act, a little bit about what your corporate liabilities are, and if things go wrong, what can happen to you as members of a board. We're going to talk about what the key issues are within health and safety, how to manage it on a daily basis, and we're going to delve into issues like ownership, leadership and mainstreaming, and we're going to talk about this document here, which I believe you've all got a copy of. Do you remember getting a copy of this? It's a HSA piece of guidance for directors and senior managers. You would have got that emailed out to you, and we'll be referring to that as well. Okay. And in the world of health and safety, and if you've never had any training in health and safety, that's fine. We're going to try and sort that out tonight. But there's a lot of myths about health and safety, which I want to deal with. One is that there's no safe way to do this job, which of course is untrue. There's a safe way to do everything, even to climb Mount Everest. There's a safe way to do that. There's a safe way to put scaffolding up on a tall building. There's a safe way to use explosives if that's the business you're in. There's a safe way to do everything if you're bothered, and if you take the time to do it, there's a safe way to do it. Employees will be careful and safety will happen. You can have the most safety conscious employee on the planet who comes into your organization, but if they're put into an unsafe environment and they're not given any information or training or maybe protective equipment, or they're not told exactly what they need to do and how to do it, they can have an accident. It's not their fault. They were the victim of something else they weren't aware of. Therefore, having safe employees is not what it's at. It's about having a safe place of work, a safe system for them to follow, and giving them relevant training. That's what it's about. You might, I've heard all of these said to me in training sessions with senior people. Our people already know about safety. When I ask people, what does safety mean to you? A lot of people say first aid. That's fine. First aid is part of it. Or they talk about manual handling, or they talk about maybe using chemicals, or they talk about protecting pregnant women. They're all part of health and safety, absolutely. But by no means are they all of it, because health and safety now is such a big topic. It's as broad as medicine. So if you say to me, what's medicine about? Well, it's about people being ill and going to a doctor and trying to get help and maybe being prescribed medication, whatever. But there's a lot more to medicine than that. So health and safety is no different. You might think you know a little bit about health and safety, but I'm going to broaden that for you tonight. We're not in a dangerous industry and don't kill people, so everything is fine. So you're not in construction, you're not using explosives, you're not putting up scaffolding, and you're not putting roofs on buildings, and that's fine. But it doesn't mean that everything in your organization is safe. Depends on what you're doing and how you're doing it. And it's not about the numbers, by the way. You might have a very small organization with less than 10 people. It isn't about how many you employ, it's about the level of risk. That's what determines how much time you need to give to health and safety. If you're in a very risky organization, or you're dealing with very volatile service users or something, then you will have a lot of stuff to do with that, rather than if you're not. So the fact that you may not be in a dangerous industry is not what it's at. Everybody has to have a safety statement. Everybody has to look at how they're managing it and how they're going to risk assess it and so on. The other one that said to me is rules do not apply to management. You might have a whole range of rules about lifting properly, wearing certain protective gear, maybe gloves, maybe safety boots when certain tasks are being done. And you think, well, management don't need to do that. They're above all of that. Those rules only apply to the workers. And that's wrong. If you have managers or team leaders in your organization, they must wear all the right gear and do everything right as well, because they have to lead from the front. And if they want people to follow them and comply with the rules and do the thing right, then they must lead from the front, rather than it's only a rule for you and not a rule for me. And equally, most not-for-profits are short of money. You never have enough to do the work you want to do. And you say, well, with our budgets, we don't have the money to do health and safety. It isn't about throwing money at it. It's about an attitude, about planning, about thinking about how you're doing things. It isn't all about money. But obviously, if you're a large organization, you're expected to have the best of the best. If you're smaller, you're expected to do your level best with what you've got. Okay. Now, there's two approaches to health and safety. There's the traditional one, which is this one. Health and safety is about complying with the law. It's about getting the job done, but with health and safety as a side issue and afterthought. It's a bureaucratic burden. It's a pain in the neck. It's all about doing the paperwork for paperwork's sake. And it's all about being in good shape if the Health and Safety Authority inspects. Now, the Health and Safety Authority do inspect, and I'm dealing with two clients at the moment who've recently been visited by the Health and Safety Authority, and they've been written up for bits and pieces, and I'm trying to sort those out. But we don't manage health and safety because the Health and Safety Authority inspector might walk in the door. That's not why we do this. We do it because it's the law, it's the right thing to do, and we have an overall duty of care to the people that we employ, that work with us, and to the service users that we deliver services to. But the traditional approach was one that, you sort of reluctantly do it, you do the minimum amount, you just keep the paperwork for the sake of it, and your heart isn't in it. That's not the way to manage health and safety. The more enlightened approach is that health and safety can be managed just like everything else. In all of your organizations, you have to manage finance, you have to manage the delivery of services, whatever they are. You have to manage staff and having the right staff and enough of them in the right place at the right time to interact with whoever you're delivering services to. You've got to manage quality. You've got to manage buildings, perhaps. I don't know exactly, but you can manage health and safety exactly the same way, but it needs the same amount of management time as you give to other things. It should not be seen as an afterthought. There's a safe way to do everything if you're bothered, as I've said already. Working safely and healthily is entirely doable. In other words, we're not asking organizations to go broke to be safe. We're not saying you have to spend all your budget on health and safety in order to meet the requirements. We're saying you have to do your level best and make sure that the building is safe, the delivery of services is safe, the equipment, whatever that might be, is safe, and so on. And if you have vehicles, we have to make sure that they're safe as well. It isn't all about laws and regulations. There are lots of laws and regulations that we have to know about. It's all about people. Who are we trying to protect? We're trying to protect the staff that we have, whether they're paid or voluntary, and the people we're delivering services to, or the public who come into our buildings, depending on what we're doing. We have a duty to all of them, and we have no divine right to injure anyone. And yet people think that we do, and we don't. And the paperwork, as I've said already, sadly, we've got to keep records about training, about maintenance. All of that has to be kept to prove that you did whatever you did in case a question is asked, because your word against somebody else's doesn't work anymore. Now, I want to just give you an idea of how health and safety works. When I was in industry some years ago, I worked for a large American multinational. Mary Robinson was the newly elected president at the time, and she was coming on a visit to the big factory that I worked in. Fantastic. We were all very excited about it. So we sat down a few weeks before she came and said, okay, she's going to be here for an hour and a half, 2 hours. She's going to have lunch. She's going to meet the senior management team, and she's going to take a walk in part of the factory. Not all of it. She wouldn't have time. So we had to decide, where are we going to bring her? What are we going to show her? And we obviously wanted to show off the most prestigious part of the factory at that time. And it was a particular area where this was a factory that makes contact lenses. It was a company called Bausch & Lomb, which still exists at the moment. So she was going to go into a particular area where they're working on contact lenses, where they're cutting them on a machine to get them to the right shape. Now, all the staff in there have to wear safety glasses with side shields, because these lenses, when they're being cut on the machine, the lens can shatter. And it shatters very quickly, and the pieces of the lens come out of the machine, and they're so microscopically small, you won't see them coming, and they would hit your eye before you'd have a chance to blink. So the safety glasses meant that protected you, and therefore the bits would hit your glasses and not your face and not your eye. So when they said in a senior management meeting, this is where they were going to bring the president, I said, okay, if she's going to go into what I call the danger zone, where that work is going on, then she too will have to wear safety glasses. And all the people with her who are near those machines will have to wear safety glasses. And that would be her husband and her bodyguards and all the rest of it. And initially they laughed at me and they said, "You're joking." I said, "No." I said, "She's a human being. She may be the head of state, the president of the country, but she's a human being with two eyes, and we want her in for a lovely visit and out of here in 2 hours with all her bits and pieces intact." And I said, "Would you prefer a headline in the paper, 'President loses eye in contact lens factory'? Would you like that as the headline in the Irish Times the following day?" And it made them sit up. So eventually they said, okay. I said, she either wears the glasses and goes into that zone, or we don't let her into that zone and we bring the staff from that zone over to meet her, and there's a rope separating the two groups. Make up your mind which it is, because my duty as the safety manager at the time was to protect everybody, including the president and her entourage. So what happened? We got the most beautiful new safety glasses available at the time. They swept around your face. They were ballet French glasses. They came in lovely different frames and colors, and they were fabulous. And she wore them and had no difficulty wearing them. Her husband wore them. Her bodyguards wore them. The mayor and all the others who traipsed along behind her all wore them. The point I'm making is what? The point is that nobody is above the rule, not even the head of state. If the Pope came in the morning and went into that same part of the factory, he would have to wear safety glasses as well. That's the point. And managers going in there who might be at a very senior level should, as a matter of courtesy, wear those glasses to show leadership to the staff. I'm following the rules just like I expect you to follow the rules, because we're all vulnerable because of these lenses. That's the point I'm making. Nobody is exempt from the rules. If it's a good rule, well thought out, and that's how we're protecting people. Okay, now in health and safety, your people are your most important asset. You know, unless you have a robotic operation, which is without people, you need your people to deliver your services to your service users. Without them, you can do nothing. If they're injured, there aren't a queue of people to replace them. There's skill shortages all over the place at the moment. So protecting them is not just the law, it's a fundamental business issue, because without them, you may have to shut down. I mean, I was in a hotel last week in Dublin, and they're supposed to have 2 restaurants operating. There was only one with a limited menu. And I asked, why isn't the main menu on? We can't get the staff either in the kitchen or to serve people. So the limited menu is all we can offer. That's the reality at the moment. So staff are a key asset. And accidents and injuries cost money. Even small accidents, a cut on the finger, a burn on the arm, a trip where somebody hurts their knee, these things interrupt the service. They take up management time and they diminish effectiveness. Now, we have legal and moral obligations, which come from our laws and our regulations. We have both common law and statutory law to create a safe place of work for everybody. And the way the law works is, if you're on a board or you're part of a board, the board and management together are considered to be risk creators. You're the ones who decide, we're going to open up this building, we're going to deliver a range of services, we're going to use this equipment and that equipment, and we're going to employ 5 people or whatever. You're the people who make those decisions, and you've got budgets to make it happen. Therefore, you are creating the risk if you're not seen to manage the risk. And then when you bring in employees, they're then taking those risks because you haven't gotten rid of them or managed them out or sort of guarded them out. And you have moral obligations not to hurt anyone. And equally, if you're seen to injure staff week in, week out, what's that saying to your local community? They say, well, I wouldn't go work there because everyone who goes in there gets injured and comes out with burns and scalds and broken fingers or whatever else. I wouldn't go working there. So you've got to, you know, meet the demands of your community as a responsible employer who treats people decently. and does the right thing. Now, common law is what happens when somebody has an accident and they feel it's your fault and they take a case against you for compensation, which they're entitled to do if that's what they wish to do. And then they can either do it through the injuriesboard.ie, or they can go to court, and there's different rules about that, and they may or may not get compensation, and the judge will decide what their injury is worth, if anything at all. Statute law, on the other hand, is law that's dictated by our TDs. It's voted on in the Oireachtas, and they pass certain laws. And the main law that we need to be concerned about is the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act 2005, and a whole range of regulations coming underneath that. And that puts a whole range of duties on the employer and on the employee. The employer is the board and the CEO and the management team, if there is one. And we have to look at both physical issues like slips, trips and falls, electricity, the safety of equipment, maybe chemicals that we're using. But we also need to look at the psychological well-being of people. Is there a risk of violence here? Are people under stress? Is there bullying going on? Is there sexual harassment going on that makes life difficult for those who work here? So we have to look at all of that, not just the physical. Now, Philip, could we stop the recording just for one moment? Philip, are you there?
Yes, Mary, I am. Sorry, I was just on pause. I'll pause it right now.
Okay, now you also got a handout emailed to you, at least you should have done. And this is what, just move my screen over here. This is what it looked like at the front. Has everybody got that? Yes?
Yeah.
It says handout.
No, I don't have.
Sorry?
I don't have this paper.
You don't have that paper, no?
Sorry, Rawa, I can send that to you right now.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Phillips.
Okay, because I'm now going to refer to some pages in that document, so you will need it in front of you. I want to talk about the fact that there are important definitions within this document. Sorry, I'll just go back up there, so I have to go back. The first definition is every organization must have the services of a competent person to advise them on health and safety. Now, if you're a small organization, you cannot justify having a full-time health and safety person. It would be ridiculously expensive. The larger organizations can afford that. That's what they do, like I was in industry for years. But I act, because I'm an independent consultant and I work with a range of companies, I act as their competent person from outside. That's quite legal, and I work with them every so often, and that's how they get the right advice and the right training. But because you're small, you can't say to the Health and Safety Authority, oh, we're small, we can't afford to have a full-time health and safety person, therefore we've no one. That's not acceptable. You've got to have someone. If it's not internal, it's got to be external, or it could be a half and half situation. The other thing is there are a whole range of duties on employers within this act, and all of the duties have a subclause which says reasonably practicable. In other words, the first one there, you must manage and conduct your activities to ensure safety and health, both physical and psychological, as far as is reasonably practicable. And what that means in layman's English is you do your level best with the budget you've got, with the information you've got, and you try and do your best to safeguard everybody. So if you're a big multinational like I worked for, they're expected to have the best of the best, the absolute Rolls-Royce solution to the problem. If you're a small organization employing 15 people with a limited budget, you are not expected to have the Rolls-Royce solution, but you are expected still to have a solution, but it might not be so nice to look at, it might not be so slick. That's the point, really. You must consult with employees. That's a rule within the Act. It isn't just management deciding on everything. This is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. This is the equipment we're buying. These are the services we're going to deliver. Staff have a right to know, what am I being asked to do? Why is that equipment being changed? Am I going to be trained on this equipment? Am I going to be trained to do that task and the other task? And or they have the right to say, I'm worried about this, or I want to make a comment about that, or I'm unhappy about something else. They have the right to consult and to speak to management and have their views heard, basically. Management must provide training and information. This idea of dumping people in the deep end is not acceptable. People need training and information about how to do the job so they could do it safely. And as I've said before, every organization must have a safety statement, which is basically your program in writing for how we're managing health and safety in this particular organization. And each one is different. So when I work with clients all the time, the safety statement, it's like a skeleton. The skeleton is the same bony structure, but the flesh you're putting on it will be different. So it'll be different from a manufacturing company to a not-for-profit, to a retail organization, to a shopping center. They will all be different because they'll have different issues and different priorities, but they will all have certain sections that need to be filled in. And that's what that policy document helps you with, okay? Now, as well as the 2005 Act, and I've given you all the employer's duties on page 2 of that handout. We don't have time to go through them all. There's so many of them. And equally on page 3 of that document, there are duties on employees. Employees have legal duties too, and they need to be told what those duties are when they join the organization first. That's where your induction training comes in. So I'll leave you all to read all of that. Now, beyond this 2005 Act that I've said, which is our baseline piece of law, there's a whole range of regulations called the General Application Regulations. They represent a detailed roadmap for managing health and safety in detail, and there's positive and negative aspects of that, in that they are very prescriptive. They tell you exactly what you should be doing, and therefore if you're not doing it, the Health and Safety Authority can say, well, you're not doing regulation 16 or regulation 92, and therefore we can prosecute you. So there's it's good in that it gives you the detail. It's not so good in that they can prosecute you more easily than they can under the 2005 Act. These are the things that are covered in the General Application Regulations. They have a whole set of regulations on workplace safety signs, use of work equipment, work at height, control of vibration, protection of children, pregnant women, manual handling, electricity. All these things are dealt with in minute detail in these regulations. And I don't expect you to know all about them. That's what your competent person will advise you about. They get into the nitty-gritty of this and make sure that you're complying with all of it, okay? It's very detailed, so if we were to go through all of those and all the schedules at the back, we'd be here for a week. So we don't have that luxury this evening. Now, let's talk about corporate and personal liabilities. If things go wrong and, you know, heaven help us, somebody gets badly injured or killed at your organization, then the Health and Safety Authority gets involved. Now, if there's an accident, you're obliged to report it if it causes the person to be out for more than 3 days. If it's less than 3 days, you don't have to report it. You can deal with it yourself. But if it's more than 3 days, you have to go online and report it to the Health and Safety Authority. And obviously, and that goes online into their computer database. If they see you reporting a lot of these, they'll say, my God, what's going on in that organization? That's their 5th or 6th accident this month. We better go down and visit them and see what kind of an organization they're running. Equally, if you put on something that's really serious, like somebody broke a leg, somebody lost an eye, somebody fell down the stairs and broke their neck, and the minute you notify them of that, they will be out to you within 24 hours. And obviously, if somebody dies on your property or premises, then they will certainly be down, and they'll shut everything down until they investigate how that person died, why they died, and so on, and who broke what laws, if that's the case, and who's responsible. Now, they do prosecute. In every case of a fatality, they prosecute. There's only one case of a fatality where they don't prosecute, and that is where a child dies on a farm. And sadly, we have children being killed on farms every year because farming is quite a dangerous place to work. And where you have family farms, sometimes children are allowed to roam freely on farms, which they shouldn't be doing, and they get caught under a tractor, or they're run over by a trailer or whatever, or they fall into a slurry tank. But where a child dies on a farm, they don't prosecute the farmer because the farmer is already grieving over their child, and therefore they don't add to that grief by dragging them to the courts. But if it's anybody else, any other organization, they will drag you into court and throw the book at you in terms of, this person died and we believe it's your fault. And by the way, they can prosecute the organization, whatever your organization is, but they can also prosecute individuals, the chairperson of your board, the chief executive if they wish, or a manager or a team leader, depends on the situation, but they will try and find somebody that they can pin something on to hold them to account. So corporate liability lies with the organization, but personal liabilities can lie with the board, chairperson, board members, CEO and other managers, depending on the case. Each case is looked at individually. Now, when you're on the board of an organization, which many of you are, you can delegate any jobs you like to your management team. You can say, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. And you can legally do that, there's no problem. But you can't abdicate your responsibilities and say, well, I told the general manager to do that, and because she didn't do that and something went terribly wrong, don't look at me, go to her, she's accountable. It doesn't work like that. You have to make sure that the person you've given the job to can do it, has had the training to do it, has the resources to do it. And if you're their boss and you're meeting them once a week or once a month, are you asking them when you meet them, how is the health and safety side of it going? Are you able to do all the stuff I asked you to do? Are you managing the budgets? Are you doing this, that, and the other? And you've got to keep a watching brief. So the board can't just say, we told the manager to do it, they didn't do it, therefore we're off the hook. It doesn't work like that anymore. It used to, but not anymore. Any records can be brought into court. Safety statements, training records, incident reports, anything at all can be brought into court if it's relevant to either help you or to damn you, depending on what's going on. And when they get managers into the witness box, and it might be you in the witness box, it could be one of your managers, they want to know who was leading this organization, who was competent to do it, who was managing the situation on the day, what resources did they have, who was responsible, and who's accountable. Those are the things they explore in the courts, and you're cross-examined by barristers when they get to a prosecution stage. Now, there's two sections within the 2005 Act that we need to talk about, Section 80 and Section 81. Section 80 talks that directors and managers of all undertakings, commercial and not-for-profit, can be held personally liable. Directors acting on professional advice remain liable. So even though many of you might be voluntary board members and you're not being paid for your services, and that's very commendable, that doesn't let you off the hook either. The fact that you're there on a board making decisions about equipment, about services, about staffing, whatever, that means you've got responsibilities to do with health and safety, and you've got to undertake them properly. And equally, if I gave professional advice to an organization, which I do every day, and if that advice proved to be wrong and it led to an injury or a fatality, the injured person could sue that organization, and that organization could then counter sue me, saying you gave us bad information and we acted on it. And that's why I have professional indemnity insurance of €1.5 million. So if you are engaging a health and safety consultant to help you, and you don't have to do that, by the way, you can do it yourself, but obviously if you do it all yourself, you have to be responsible for what you've done, and if it's found to be lacking, then the buck stops with you. Whereas if you engage with a safety consultant and they advise you or write up your documents for you, then the buck stops with them. But if you are talking to any safety consultant, and it doesn't have to be me, ask them first of all, are they a member of IOSH? That's IOSH. That's the professional body for health and safety people. Like you have a professional body for engineers called Engineers Ireland, and you've got IMO for doctors, and you've got the Law Society for solicitors. Every profession has their own professional body. So it's IOSH, and that stands for the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health. And anybody that you're dealing with should be a chartered member of that or better. Now, if they're not a member of IOSH at all, then walk away and talk to somebody else, because it means they're not up to scratch at all. And it means IOSH won't give them membership because they don't meet the criteria. Okay. And also ask them about professional indemnity insurance. Now, Section 81 is an interesting one. If you're accused of murder in the morning, you're deemed to be innocent until proven guilty. In this Act, the 2005 Act, it's the other way around. If the HSA accuses your organization of breaching a certain regulation or a certain part of the Act, you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent. And the only way you can prove yourself innocent is by bringing forth evidence, all your paperwork saying, We are not responsible for that, because look at what we did, and we did our safety statement, and we did all this training, and we did a monthly safety inspection, and blah, 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 blah. And you've got to bring all your evidence into court to prove that you are not guilty of the charges against you. It's not the way I'd like to sort of do it, but that's the way it was written, and that's the way our TDs voted on it. So that's the way the law works. I don't like it, but I have to make you aware of it. Okay. Now, when they dish out penalties, if they find the organization is guilty or the individual is guilty, because they can take prosecutions against individuals as well, the fixed charge penalties that were supposed to come in are not in. Forget about that. If it's a summary conviction, that's one done in the district court, meaning it's a middle grade offence. They can fine you up to 5,000 per offence, or up to 12 months jail, or both, and they can take a case up to 12 months after the incident. If it's a much more serious charge, like you've killed somebody, or you've maimed somebody, or maybe you've killed a number of people in an explosion or something, then the fines can be up to 3 million per offence, or 2 years jail, or both. And if you get jail or you get convicted, these are criminal convictions, because this is criminal law. And you can also, depending on the circumstances, you could be banned from being a director for 5 years. And the Health and Safety Authority reserves the right to publish a list of offenders, both in the press, saying we've prosecuted Joe Bloggs and company in Galway today, and this is what they did, and these are the rules they broke, and we also prosecuted their general manager, Paddy Maloney, who did that, and they name names, and they talk about what people did or didn't do, and that's all a matter of public record, and they put it all up on their website. And in the document, the handout that I've sent you, I've given you a whole list of prosecutions, which are a matter of public record. They're not a secret. I've given you loads of them, going from 2020 back to 2008. And some of the fines are huge. Some of the fines are up to 1 million. One of the fines was up to 3 million. So these are not, and obviously the fines are given in proportion to the size of your organization. If you're a small organization, the fine will be small. If you're a big organization, the fine will be relative to that will be big. Okay. Now, these are the kinds of prosecutions that have taken place. In 2019, there was 10,300 inspections, 21 prosecutions, and they had fines of 938,000 euro imposed on people. In 2020, they did the same roughly number of inspections. They had 13 prosecutions, yet they brought in more fines, 1.3 million. So it depends on the cases, how big the fines are, depending on what the HSA wants to do. Okay. Now, could we pause the recording again, please, Philip?
Of course, Mary.
Okay, so I mean, in the open forum, I did ask these questions. How are you feeling now? Are alarm bells going off in your head? What key issues, do you think you need to address? What specifically do you need help with? And that will vary from organization to organization. We won't dwell on that. Okay, let's talk about some of the big health and safety issues. These are the classic accidents, believe it or not, that injure Irish people every day of the week. This is what causes people to be out injured from work. Back injuries from handling and lifting is number one and has been number one for years, and it doesn't move from the number one slot. The second one is slips, trips, and falls. That slips on untidy floors, slippery floors, greasy floors where there's spillages, you name it. The third one is injuries from machinery and equipment, which can be anything. It could be catering equipment, it could be driving vehicles and dealing with meals on wheels or whatever. Falls from heights, people doing maintenance, people getting up on ladders, people climbing up on racking for whatever reason. Being struck by falling objects, again, generally from racking. Transported vehicles hitting employees. If you don't have any vehicles as part of your organization, then that's not going to be a problem for you. But if you do have vehicles loading or unloading or delivering or whatever, then there's issues you may need to have a look at. Harmful substances damaging skin and eyes. That's chemicals that you may use either to clean your building or clean your kitchen or whatever it might be. Hand injuries from hand tools. If you have maintenance going on, if you have people doing maintenance and using hand tools, then those can be an issue. And then depending on the service users you're interacting with, if you have service users who are potentially violent or aggressive, then they can, in some cases, cause malicious injuries to your staff or to your volunteers. And if that's the case, that has to be managed as well. And that's a whole different area that we can get into. Okay, These are the classic accident victims that actually get hurt. And they are new starters. They're the people who, you know, have just joined your organization, who are new, don't understand what's going on, may only be receiving basic training, and they're vulnerable for about 6 to 8 weeks, depending on what the job is, until they get settled in and they understand what they're doing and how to do it. And they may need to be buddied up with somebody else to show them the ropes until they get settled in. Young people, obviously, and young men, by the way, can be a particular problem. Young men, if they're asked to wear gloves or safety glasses or maybe safety boots, or they're asked to lift in a particular way, some young men, typically between 18 and 24, don't want to comply. They don't think it's cool. It's not what I want to do. I won't hurt myself. I'm a fit, young, healthy guy. And yet they can get hurt like everybody else. And we have to deal with that. And if you have a rule that they have to wear gloves or glasses or whatever it might be, then the rule applies to everybody, as we've said. And if they don't comply, then you're having to have a serious chat with them. And if they still don't comply, then you're into disciplinary action, which is not the way you want to go. Older people, if you've older people working for you, we just need to keep a watching brief on how physically fit they are. Are they up to doing the job in whatever the job demands? If the job is a lot of physical lifting or unloading or loading up or making up food boxes in a food bank, whatever you might be doing, are they up to doing that, depending on their medical conditions, their age, and so on? We need to be careful that we're not putting them under too much stress. Management can also have accidents, and in many cases it's because they don't believe the rules apply to them and they break the rules and they do ridiculous things and get hurt. If you bring in contractors, self-employed contractors, to clean the windows, to cut the grass, to maintain your building, to paint the walls, or whatever they might come in to do, they, if they're single, you know, a man operating on his own, he probably doesn't have a safety statement, he probably doesn't have insurance, and therefore he isn't up to speed with health and safety regulations and may not be working safely at all, and he can hurt himself or he can hurt others. So I'm never keen on the one-man band, plumbers, electricians, painters, or gardeners. You're better off with a company who have a few vans on the road, who are recce registered or whatever, and who know what they're doing. They're more likely to be up to speed with health and safety than the single guy who hasn't worked for a company for years and is totally out of touch. Contractors themselves, before you let any contractor into your building, you need to ask them for their safety statement. They have to have one. Everybody has to have one, even if there's only one person employed. That's a legal requirement since 1989. We need to see evidence of their insurance that indemnifies your organization, and we need to see some evidence of their expertise and their training in terms of what they're going to do. If they're coming in to do what I call highly dangerous work, like electrical work, gas, or work at height, like roof work, then we need a thing called a method statement. If you bring in summer students, and you might do, depending on your organization, they might have all the theory, but none of the practice. And they need to be, again, buddied up with somebody else who knows what they're doing. You can't just dump them in the deep end and hope they can swim, because they may hurt themselves. And if they do, you're liable anyway. And obviously, if children come into your enterprise or are involved in your enterprise, then you've got a whole raft of considerations about children, because they don't understand danger. They will touch things they shouldn't touch. They might climb up on things they shouldn't climb up on. And if you have a kitchen, for instance, where maybe you're cooking food for people, a child should not be able to go into your kitchen freely. There should be some control on the door, whether it's a push button thing or a swipe thing. And a child should not be allowed to go into a commercial kitchen where there's hot liquids and hot surfaces and all the rest of it. So, and if children get hurt, by the way, while they're on your premises, mom and dad will sue you. Mom and dad will not hesitate to sue you, because they'll never believe that their little Johnny misbehaved and that it's all your fault, and so on. And it's very difficult to defend a case where a child has been injured. Okay, how do accidents happen? They happen because of a range of things. For one thing happens, and then the next thing happens, and then the next thing happens, and suddenly we've an accident. And it's normally a combination of unsafe conditions or unsafe actions on the part of people. And that's the problem, where we didn't either understand the unsafe conditions, or didn't do anything about them, or didn't identify them, or in terms of the unsafe actions, we didn't train the people properly to know what they were doing properly. And that's what we need to think about to stop accidents happening. The whole business that I'm in health and safety is the business of prevention, stopping accidents happening in the first place so we don't have injuries, we don't have claims, and everyone can get on with the work they're doing in safety. That's what we're trying to do. Now, management have the major responsibilities here. Staff have some, but management have the main ones. Health and safety must be managed equally to finance, HR, all the rest of it. All managers need to show leadership and demonstrate commitment, that they lead from the front, they understand what the hazards are in their area, and they're committing resources to sort them out. They'll be judged on what they do as well as what they say or write down. In other words, I've seen the most wonderful policies and the most wonderful safety statements ever written. But in some organizations, none of it's actually happening. It's all a fairy tale. Whereas the real companies are what they write down is what they do, and we can be measured against it. That's where you know a real organization who are committed to this area. You set safety standards. If you're the manager or the team leader in an area, you set the safety standards. This is what I expect from you. You must wear this, do that, follow that, whatever, and you keep the standards up. You communicate what you want, you train everyone, and you keep records about what you did, and you have to be a good role model yourself. Otherwise, they say, well, you're not doing it or you're not wearing it, and yet you want me to do it. Okay? Now, when accidents happen, they cost money. Now, some of that can be recovered on insurance. If somebody makes a claim, that's a fact. But sometimes the insurance doesn't cover everything. So insurance covers civil claims. It covers maybe product liability. It will not cover criminal fines. So if the organization or individuals in the organization are prosecuted, if you're fined, there's no insurance to cover the fines at all. It doesn't exist. And obviously, if you make a lot of claims, your insurance is going to go up. And employer's liability is costing about 190 million a year, and it's going up. Now, what's not necessarily insured, it depends on your policy. If you decide to pay for the treatment for somebody who's injured, and that might be the right decision, by the way, you might agree to pay for them to get some physio sessions. And that might be, and you might agree to pay 5 or 6 sessions to get them back to work sooner, and that might be the right thing. Lost time, you may lose time in terms of this person being out and you aren't able to deliver the services you were before. You might have to train somebody else up to fill the job of the injured person. There are supervision costs, there's investigation costs, and obviously if it goes to court, and not all accidents go to court, but some of them certainly do, once they go to court, it's a matter of public record, and the papers are in the court and the local radio station is in the court, and they have the right to report all of it. All your dirty linen is washed in public, and you did this and you failed to do that, and manager this and supervisor that, and they can write it all up in their paper the following week, and you can't stop them. The total cost of the losses, if you like, to Ireland Inc. is about 5 billion, and then there's huge costs to the injured person, which you can't even quantify, depending on what they've been injured, what's happened to them. Okay? So, human costs. They may have lost income, yes. They may have pain and suffering. They may have medical costs that you haven't necessarily covered. They might have had to make trips to doctors, trips to hospitals. They might not be able to drive if they've hurt their leg. It disrupts not just their work life, but their family life. If they've hurt their leg, they're not out playing golf like they normally do. They aren't able to take the children swimming like they normally do. So all of that impacts their life because of the injury they've had at work. And obviously, if they're out for a long time and they make a claim against the organization, which they have the right to do, that can lead to a very negative relationship with the employer, because now it's adversarial. And obviously, if they're out for a long, long time, they may not be able to come back to work at all because of their injury, or they may have to be moved to another job or maybe made redundant. Depends on the outcome. How to manage health and safety on a daily basis. We need to think about the hazards we have in our building. We have physical hazards, chemical hazards. We may have biological hazards, it depends. We have human factor hazards because we've human beings in there working with us and for us. And we've different strategies for each one. So, we need, what are we doing about physical hazards? What are we doing about chemical hazards? What are we doing about biological hazards? And so on. And we need a different strategy for each one. And we deal with things like stress and slips and falls and all the stuff I've mentioned already. Now, when we identify a hazard, this is what a risk assessment involves. If we identify a hazard, whatever it might be, we have to ask ourselves, this is what the Health and Safety Authority wants us to look at in correct descending order. Can we eliminate this hazard completely? And maybe you can, and if you can do that, job solved, job done. If you can't eliminate it, then can you substitute it for something else? Let's say it's a dangerous chemical that you're cleaning the floor with, and you've discovered it's really quite a nasty chemical, and if it gets on your hands or your eye, it's going to burn you badly. So you say, can we get rid of this? No, we need to still wash the floor. Okay, can we substitute it with something not quite as harmful that might still clean the floor? We might be able to do that. So we try and get a safe substitute. Can we segregate staff from it? Okay, only the cleaning staff deal with it. Nobody else needs to touch it. And when they're cleaning the floor, the whole place is closed and the floor is allowed to dry and the buckets are all emptied and no one else enters until the floor is dry. Now, if it's a guarding issue, can we enclose the machine so staff don't get harmed by the machine? Can we guard it in some way? Can we limit the time people are exposed to it, or limit the number of people that are exposed to it? Or can we give people training and information to equip them to deal with it? And then as a last resort, we're asked to give them what we call personal protective equipment. That's things like glasses, gloves, boots, and on a building site, it would be hard hats and so on. But what a lot of companies do is they look at the hazard, let's say it's a chemical, we'll give the person gloves, and that's all they do. And they never go through the others to see, could we get a safer chemical? Could we get one that's water soluble rather than solvent based, or whatever it might be? So this is what the Health and Safety Authority wants you to do, to try and get the safest things in your building that you can that will still do the job for you. In this case, clean the floor, if that's what you're doing. Does everyone understand what I mean? Yep, okay. So when you're doing a risk assessment, you identify the hazards, you assess how risky it'll be. Is it high risk, medium risk, low risk? It can be as simple as that. You consult with your employees who are doing the job. How do you feel about this? Do you feel this is a major hazard? Do you find it difficult to use? Do you feel unsafe using it? Blah, 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 blah. And then you put in appropriate control measures, like I've said, and you deal with the most dangerous things first, and you work your way down then to the less serious ones. And in all cases, you give people information, training, and supervision, and then you check over time, is that still working? Is that, you know, practical to do? Is that all working well for you, whatever? And you try and look at how likely is this to happen and how severe will it be. Now, I have given you in this handout, again, for those of you who had it, I've given you some risk assessments on page 9 and page 10. I gave you one that was fully done on housekeeping, one that was fully done on fire, and then I had one that was partially done on manual handling. And I was asking all of you to look at that one as an exercise and see what control measures you would put in for manual handling. So, Philip, could we pause the recording again, please? Okay, so let's get into some of the more deep management stuff here. I'm very fond of the word mainstreaming, because what I found in companies is you have a board of management or you have a senior management team managing an organization, and they're doing their level best, and they're trying to manage money and services and staff and community involvement, whatever it might be. And if there's a health and safety problem, it arises, they bring it into their mainstream operation, they deal with it, and then health and safety vanishes again until we have a new problem. That's not the way to manage health and safety. You need to bring health and safety into mainstream operations. So you budget for health and safety. If there isn't a budget for it, sit down and try and put one together. You include it in all plans and projects if you're extending or offering new services or putting out a new AstroTurf out the back, whatever it might be. You have health and safety on every agenda at every meeting, board meetings, management meetings, staff meetings, whatever kind of meetings you're having, no matter what they're about. It could be about new cleaning chemicals or, you know, relaying out the parking spaces outside in the car park. There's a safety element to everything, and I want health and safety mainstreamed into everything that you think about and everything that you make decisions about. And that way it'll be properly managed, rather than we deal with it when there's a problem and then it vanishes again. That's crisis management, and that's not what we want. You build it into every management decision, every purchasing decision. Every time you go out to buy something, you're buying a new cooker for the kitchen, you're buying a new vacuum cleaner for the cleaners. and you're buying a new trolley, you've a chance to get it right or you have a chance to get it wrong. Okay, so you buy the best your budget can afford, you buy the safest version of whatever it is you're buying. And if it's a cooker, obviously, it isn't just a plug-in job, it has to be wired in properly by a competent electrician, not just the handyman down the road who does a bit of handiwork for you. If it's something to do with gas, it has to be put in by a registered gas installer. The idea of using a local handyman or maybe your own handyman, you can still use them, but they will do door handles and toilet seats and maybe handles on windows, and they might do a bit of painting and decorating, but they should not, unless they're qualified, touch gas or electricity or go near the roof. You with me? That's for specialists who know what they're doing, but they can do other general maintenance work if that's what they're required to do, if you have caretakers like that. Health and safety needs to be built into all company goals and objectives. If you have a bonus scheme, it has to be built into that. And you need to do a regular inspection to keep the place right. So you're trying to spot a problem before it's a problem. So you spot the door is hanging off the hinges before it falls and hits somebody. That's the point. And you review all accidents and incidents because everybody has them. Hopefully they're minor, and you review all of them to say, what went wrong here? What can we do differently so it doesn't happen again? How do we learn from this and move on and be safer next time round? Okay. We need to make sure that employees are competent, that they're fully trained, they know what they're doing, and we have to have training records to prove that we did it. Refresher training, as I've said, every couple of years. And if it's specialized training to, handle violence or aggression or to operate equipment, manual handling, chemical, we have to have all of that. Employees should only be asked to do what they're trained to do. And training must be recorded, because if it isn't recorded, and that involves signatures, by the way, if I'm the trainer, I say I trained John O'Reilly this morning, and he has to sign, to say he got trained by me. And then if somebody's been trained to do something, then management have to reinforce that. So if you teach somebody, or if you bring in somebody to teach manual handling today, and you see them lifting incorrectly tomorrow, you have to say, hold on a second, Mary, you got that training yesterday. What are you doing? That's not what you were taught yesterday. We want to see you lifting properly. So you have to reinforce what you've spent the money on. The other issues that can come back to haunt you are housekeeping. Housekeeping, slips, trips and falls, untidy workplaces, cluttered walkways are all unacceptable. Get supplies off the floor, get them onto shelves or into cupboards, no trailing cables, good flooring and lighting. Remember too that every walkway which is used for normal operations, whatever your operations are, they become evacuation routes in an emergency. And people shouldn't have to step over obstacles to get out of the building. If there's an emergency, they should be able to walk quickly to the nearest exit. Fast action after spills. Spills should be dealt with, put up a little yellow man, all that kind of stuff. Regular cleanups, emptying of bins, and we should be clear as to whose job it is to clean up. Is it my job? No, I thought it was his job. No, he thought it was her job, and therefore nobody did it, and the place is a tip. Fire is an issue that affects every organization. There's a risk of fire everywhere. Once you have electrics, once you have any kind of combustibles, and then if you've got any flammable chemicals, you're adding to it. Prevention is the way to go with fire. We try and prevent fire rather than we deal with it if it happens, but our effort goes into prevention. And how do we do that? We have effective security. We don't let everyone just walk around our building willy-nilly. We want to know who you are, where you are, what's your business, what are you doing, and who are you meeting or what are you coming in for. People need to understand what fire is. If you smell heat, and if you're a member of staff, you follow your nose. Where's that smell coming from? It could be that somebody accidentally left a tea towel on a hot plate, and if we can catch it early, we don't have a whole kitchen on fire. Good housekeeping, corridors and stairs all clear because they become evacuation routes. We control smoking. Should be no smoking in any buildings at all. Many organizations now ban smoking on their entire site, and that's fantastic because then they've got to go way out to smoke, and that eliminates another problem for you. Good electrics. When were your electrics last checked? You're supposed to do a 5-yearly inspection and certification of your electrics every 5 years. You need a competent electrician to do that. I'm not qualified to do that, but they will look at not just what you can see, but what you can't see above the ceiling and so on. If you've got machines that get hot, like a deep fat fryer, you've got to make sure that if the oil is emptied out of that because you're changing it, and maybe you leave it empty until tomorrow, that the heat isn't left on, and that it's now an empty deep fat fire which will catch fire because there's no oil in it to heat. No portable heaters ideally, and storage away from heat so we don't have boxes catching fire. And then obviously closing doors. If you have doors that are self-closing, let them self-close, and never wedge a door open. Or if you do wedge a door open, you only wedge it temporarily because you're moving furniture from one room to another. By the way, the greatest irony that I see all the time is where you have a fire door wedged open by a fire extinguisher. Just think about that. A fire door is to stop fire spreading from one room to the other, or from a room into a corridor, and yet I've seen one very recently wedged open by a fire extinguisher. That's the complete irony that I see every day of the week where I go to inspect. Safe equipment. All of your equipment must be safe, whether it's kitchen equipment, community center equipment, whether it's computers, whether it's vehicles. Have any of you got vehicles that you're using to deliver maybe meals on wheels to people? Anyone operating vehicles of any kind? Vehicles are a whole ball game in their own right. Safe equipment needs to be bought. You buy the best you can afford, you get it installed properly, and then you maintain it. And have you all heard about CE marking? CE marking, anything that's offered for sale in Europe, whether it's made in Europe or not, must be CE marked. That wouldn't apply to tables and chairs, but it would apply to any equipment that you plug in that has power. You buy new, you don't buy secondhand, because if you buy secondhand, you could be buying somebody else's death trap. So don't do it. Wait till you have enough money to buy the new thing from the reputable supplier. You buy quiet, don't buy the noisy machine, buy the quietest one you can get, the best guarded and so on. Take ergonomics into account. That's the whole postures of the staff using it. And it has to be installed by competent people, be it electricians, registered gas installers, and ongoing maintenance by proper maintenance people, either your own or outsiders if they're qualified. Manual handling we've talked about. It's the biggest cause of people losing time in Ireland today, and has been for years. And yet we're doing lots of really good manual handling training, and the instructors are excellent. They're all qualified people, and the training is fantastic. So why isn't the training working? The reason it isn't working is because, I'm just going to pull the blind because the sun is blinding me. Excuse me for 1 second. I'm going to pull the blind in my room here. Sorry now. Now, sorry about that. I had to pull the blind down. It's too bright. The reason the manual handling training isn't working is because that's all companies are doing. Unlike John, who had other very good control measures in place, they're saying there's the training that's going to sort you out. We don't need to do anything else, and that's all we need to do. And the training isn't being applied, isn't being used every single day, and therefore it's not working. Okay. So we've moved on. Sorry, now. Yes, manual handling. Yes. So it's not just lifting up; it's putting down and pushing and pulling and all the rest of it. And the best approach is to risk assess all tasks and try and eliminate the need for manual handling, like the use of trolleys, like the use of pallet trucks, hand trucks, whatever works for you. Go for it. And if manual handling cannot be avoided, then training is obligatory. And again, you get in a qualified instructor. You check that they have the right training instructor paperwork. You record the training goes ahead, and then you reinforce it afterwards. That's what you need to do. Then, yes, health and safety issues in offices. All of you have offices, I'm sure, of some kind. So you've got things like housekeeping. You're obliged to do a display screen equipment assessment of people's workstations. There has to be 4.65 square meters of space per person. So you can't cram a load of people into a very small space. It's not legally right. The issues of stress. If people are all on top of each other in an office, stress can be a very big issue. Manual handling then again in offices. You've got to think about getting people out of an office in an emergency or a fire situation. You've got to make sure the electricity is right, and is the work equipment up to scratch, and are the chairs decent chairs for them to sit on. The chair, by the way, is the most important thing, not the computer, not the software, not even the lighting or whatever, the chair, because the chair will determine whether they've got good back support, whether they're comfortable. And if they're comfortable in their chair, if their workstation is set up reasonably well, then they'll be reasonably productive doing whatever they do on their computer. And we have to think about stress, frustration, monotony. You know, are they being monitored? Do they have to, you know, do so much work per hour or whatever? Depends on what you're doing. But or are they dealing with customers, and are some of those customers difficult? Are they potentially violent? Are they tricky customers to deal with? How are we managing all of that? These are some of the awkward postures that we see in offices, and none of these are right, by the way. None of them are sitting properly, and they're going to end up with bad backs and pains in their neck and shoulders. The most common faults with computers that I find is the desk is sometimes too small to hold everything we want it to hold. Their chair is either an unsuitable chair or it's adjusted too high and they're bending down over everything. They're not sitting properly with their back touching the chair. They're leaning forward and there's a big gap between them and the back of the chair. They're using their mouse using a fully outstretched arm, which is very stressful. It should always be a bent elbow that you use the mouse with. There's no footrest if the person is short. Shorter people will need a footrest. Taller people will not. The taller people will need their chair dropped down. Shorter people want their chair brought up. Computer is not at the right angle to the window and not between strip lights. In other words, your computer should not be looking out at a window or have a window behind you. The window should be on your right or left in an ideal situation, or you need blinds to pull, like I've done with the sun in my own office here. Screen and keyboard are at one side, when in fact your keyboard and your screen should all be in one straight line in front of you. It shouldn't be keyboard here and I'm looking at my screen over there, or I'm looking at my screen over there, because then you're twisting your body every single time. That's very bad for you. And equally, sometimes people have their screen too high and they're looking up at the screen, which is very bad for their neck. The screen should be at a neutral height where their head is not up, not down, but looking straight ahead. And obviously, if you're a very tall person, the screen may have to come up. If you're a shorter person, we can bring it down. But those are the common faults we find at computers that we have to fix. And that's what a display screen equipment assessment deals with, that and a lot more. Sitting correctly looks like this. That's what that's what it should look like. The chair is adjusted correctly, elbows are level with the desk, feet are flat on the ground or on a footrest, the back is relatively straight and touching the back of the chair, no slouching, screen is high enough and close enough, and shoulders are not hunched. The screen, by the way, from wherever your sitting position is, the screen should be if you outstretch your full arm, the screen should be at your fingertips. The screen should not be too far away that you have to lean forward to look at it. You bring the screen to the person, not the person to the screen. That's how it works. Stress. Anyone stressed out there besides me? Trying to get this presentation done. Stress is all over the place, just like bullying is all over the place. It's rampant. Stress is basically a negative reaction to what's going on in your environment. Some people manage stress very well, some people don't. And everyone is individual. So you could have two identical people put into a situation. One is thriving, loving the job, getting on really well, and the other person is stressed out of their head and can't cope. And that's just the way it is, because they're different people. So work-related stress is made worse by work, if that's the case. Now, some stresses are to do with people's private lives outside of work, family difficulties, unplanned pregnancies, financial worries, whatever. And then they bring all that into work with them. And we have to try and manage that as well. So sometimes the stress is not caused by work. It's simply brought into work, but it's from home or from outside of work. We have to try and deal with that. And there's an example that I want to just show you. Stress is cumulative. So if I take a glass of water, which I have here beside me, some of you may have a glass of water as well. If I hold that glass out at full, you can see there, if I hold that glass out with my extended arm like that, that's okay for a while because the glass isn't that heavy. But if I'm left holding that glass for a half an hour or an hour, what's going to happen? My arm is going to ache and I'll want to put the glass down. That's what stress is. It's not initially a problem, but day after day, week in, week out, it builds up, and then it comes to the point where the person can no longer cope. or they crack up, or they have a nervous breakdown, or they become very ill. It can manifest itself in physical illness. And we have to try and deal with that. And if somebody comes to you and says, I'm stressed, I can't cope, whatever, then you close the door and you say, okay, Mary, sit down now and tell me what's going on and how can I help you? And you are required by law to show empathy, show understanding, offer support. Maybe they want time off. Maybe they want to work shorter hours. Maybe they need to go to counseling. If you can refer them to counseling, that's what you do. You can't just say, look, if you can't handle the job, get out of my sight, you're fired. If you do that, you're talking about an unfair dismissal case and you're in the Employment Appeals Tribunal within a few months. So you are expected to give people support. What can I do for you? How can I help you? Can I reduce your workload? Do you want to work 3 days a week rather than 5? Do you need to go to counseling? We can put you in touch with a qualified counsellor, whatever it might be, depending on what their issue is. And you know, you're required to do that. That's your duty of care again. You can't just say, get out of my office, you're no use to me. You can't do that. That's wrong. It does happen, but it's not acceptable. It does happen. What causes stress in work anyway? Role ambiguity. I don't know what my role is. I have several bosses giving me conflicting instructions. I don't know whether I'm coming or going. Therefore, I can't cope because I don't know which one to listen to. I have poor relationships at work. Maybe I'm being bullied. Maybe the people next to me are nasty people. I don't know. Management leadership is unfair. I'm being asked to do too much. She's getting away with murder, but I'm being asked to do tons of it and I can't get it done. Do I have control over my work or is it controlled by somebody else? Did I get enough training to do my job because I'm out of my depth? Are there too many demands being made on me? I'm being expected to do this and deal with customers at the desk and do the filing and do the accounts, and I'm overworked and I can't cope and I can't do it within the time I'm given. All of that stuff can lead to stress. And when people are stressed, sometimes they don't want to reveal they're stressed because they think, if I tell my manager I'm stressed, that could be the end of my career here. They'll think she can't cope and she's no good and she's going a bit gaga in the head or whatever. And yet we must have people who tell us that they're stressed so we can help them. Now, if you perceive somebody who is normally happy-go-lucky, singing around the place, and then suddenly they're not doing that and they seem to be tearful or very snappy, whatever, then management must be proactive, call them into the office, close the door and say, look, Mary, you don't seem to be yourself. Is everything all right? You don't seem to be your happy-go-lucky self. You seem to be a little bit irritable. Is there anything going on that I can help you with? Now, if they say, mind your own business, something to do with you, then that's all you could do. But you make a note of it in your diary. I brought Mary in at 4 o'clock on Wednesday the 5th, and she didn't want me to help her at all. But if she does want me to help her, then I will, and you make a note of that. Because at the end of the day, if Mary decides to take a case against the organisation for stress, you'll be judged by what you did, what you offered, the supports you offered, and whether they were refused or not. Make a note of all that. That all goes into court to say, I tried and she refused this and she refused that, and I offered to let her work shorter hours, she refused that. I offered to send her to counselling, she refused that. So if you got all this written down, then you tried your best, but she didn't meet you halfway, and therefore she can't really take a claim against you for stress because she didn't meet you halfway. And you've got to try and get into the causes of the stress. Is it overwork? Is it relationships? What is it? If you can refer people for counselling or CBT, that's cognitive behavioural therapy, anger management, whatever, then do that, because none of us are experts in stress. We may need, specialists in here, doctors and other people. And the reverse of stress is a healthy, satisfied, high-performing employee. That's what we want in all of our cases. And sometimes people have a stressful situation which is temporary. We're going to get through this. It could be an unplanned pregnancy at home. Their daughter's announced she's giving birth to a baby and they're all up the walls and they're bringing that into work. But that is going to pass when the girl has her baby and she makes a decision about whether she's keeping it or not keeping it. And then we get back to normal and the stress hopefully subsides and we get back to having this well-performing employee that we had before. Now, I mentioned contractors earlier. You select them on competence, not on price. You might get 3 quotes for something to paint the walls or cut the grass or clean the windows or whatever it might be. price should not be the only factor, because if you go for the cheapest, you are getting the cheapest and all that goes with that. You need to know who you're dealing with. Are they competent to do the roofing, whatever it might be? And you've got to talk about health and safety when you're interviewing them. You demand their safety statement, evidence of insurance, a method statement if it's dangerous, evidence of training. You control them. You decide, I only want you to work here after 5 o'clock at the weekend, because then the centre will be empty, or the offices will not be in use, or you can only work here on a Tuesday, or whatever it might be. You decide when they work, what equipment they bring in. And by the way, you share nothing with contractors. If you might have 6 ladders in your organization, and they might say, we need a ladder. Sorry, those ladders are only for our own staff. You must bring in your own ladders and your own drills and your own extension leads. We might allow you to plug into our socket, but that's all. Because if they get up on your ladder to do something and they fall off your ladder and they suffer an injury, they will want to blame your ladder, whether it was faulty or not. Whereas if they fall off their own ladder, it's got nothing to do with you. You're one step back from the liability question. You with me? Because it was their ladder, their work in that room at the time. And if they're painting a room, say you close off that room, they're inside doing that, and your staff are not in that room for the duration of the painting. We've moved them out somewhere else, and there's no interaction between the two, because these guys could drop a pot of paint or whatever on top of somebody. Now, I did, as I say, I think you did get this document. I'll just bring my thing over here. You did get this document emailed to you. Is everyone familiar with this? It's a green document. Did everybody get that? It's not a big document. It only runs to, I think, 16 pages. It's a piece of guidance that the Health and Safety Authority issued, and it's for directors and senior managers. It's a very important document, and every single one of your board, if they haven't seen it already, they should see it. It's all about ensuring good corporate governance in relation to safety in your organization, and that the board must remain up to date and informed about what's going on. So if you do have somebody at management level looking after health and safety, or it could be the manager of the centre or whatever it is, they must give a report every month, and health and safety should be part of that report, as well as finance or services or whatever it might be. And the Health and Safety Authority is holding individuals to account, which includes board members, board chairpersons, whatever you're having yourself. Now, so just a quick slide about what safety culture is. We're trying to develop a good safety culture in each of your organizations. It's where we have shared values, attitudes, and patterns of behavior, where we believe that ill health and accidents are preventable. We're doing our level best here to prevent anyone getting injured, be it staff, be it the customers coming in, be it the service users, whatever we're doing. We involve our staff fully, we train them, we've all got safety processes, we make all the information available, and it's the way we do things around here, and we wouldn't dream of doing it any other way. And if you look at the benefits of safety culture, you have high employee morale, smooth, effective operation of your enterprise, whatever that is, having all your key people at work where and when you need them, no employees being injured, no days lost and no claims, which is happy for everyone. Money saved means more money for your services, and you're protecting your brand and your reputation. What good looks like, in other words, this is what a good organization looks like who are taking health and safety seriously. Management commitment to health and safety is real. You can see it, they talk about it, they put their money where their mouth is. They put resources available, safety, time, and people. The basics are right. Housekeeping is right, machinery, fire prevention, risk assessments, all those key issues are done. Training for everyone. They entrust people to do the right thing and empower them to come back with the information. They plan all the tasks, and they use the best equipment and the best PPE, and they coach people to be better year on year, month on month. What is safety leadership? It's a way of planning, thinking and directing, coaching and doing things that puts people first. In other words, the biggest thing we need is we want to look after our people. And if we look after our people, then the services that we offer will flow from that. Every decision you take has a health and safety element. You're buying a piece of equipment, you're hiring a new member of staff, you're refurbishing a room, you're offering a new service, you're dealing with a new service user, whatever it might be. There's a health and safety element in all of it. And it's all about creating a safe environment where the healthy way is the only way. and where complying with safety systems is the norm. We wouldn't dream of doing anything else. I'm not going to bother with the shoe story because we don't have time. Now, here's an interesting slide. And I hope can everyone see this slide?
Yeah.
Where we have the beginning in red and we have excelling in blue. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is like how you get better at health and safety. So when you start off, and I'm not sure where your organizations are, you might be down here in the red where you're beginning to get health and safety started. Now, maybe you're further up, but if you're beginning, then it's management driven and owned. Then you move up, you're getting better. It's developing in the orange, where it's management initiated and quota driven. Then you get into the yellow, which is performing, management driven with increasing employee involvement and feedback. Then you're moving into the green, which is high performing, where you're now seen as a high performing organization, where it's actually led by employees with strong management support. And then when you get to be the best of the best, you're up in the blue, where you're excelling. Are you with me?
Yeah.
And that's the track that everybody needs to be on. And obviously, if you're down at the red, you're trying to get to orange. If you're orange, you're trying to get to yellow, and so on and so on. Very few companies are in the blue, by the way. But that's where I try to bring my clients from, where they start off at the red, perhaps. I try and bring them up over a period of years up to be really, really good. I mean, there's a particular company that I've been auditing for I'd say about 14 years. And when I went in to audit them first, they had a whole list of things they needed to do because they were not in good shape. There was pages and pages of stuff they had to do. And it took me all day to audit and another whole day to write it all up, to explain to them what they needed to do. Now, and I was with them recently, now, 12, 13 years on, I can do their audit in 2.5 hours. Because I'm just saying, show me this, show me that, because I know they have it, because they've implemented everything I've asked them to do, and they're really up at the green versus the blue, and I'm just looking for evidence. Show me the fire register, show me the safety statement, show me the training records, and they have it all, because they've done the work, and now they don't have to worry about the HSA coming in or anything else. They're having no accidents at all, and staff are very happy. That's where we need to get to. You won't get there overnight, by the way, but you can get there if you put the money and the effort in. Okay, so you need to look at your organization and ask yourself, where on that sliding scale is my organization, and how do I move it up to the next level? That's really what we're asking you to do. Now, the Health and Safety Authority I've mentioned already, they're the people who inspect and they enforce and they produce a lot of guidance. By the way, if you're looking for information on health and safety, they have a fantastic website, which is hsa.ie. And if you open up hsa.ie, there's a search box in the top right. You can put in anything: electricity, pregnant women, manual handling, safety statements, and they'll bring up a number of sources for you, and you can download everything for free. You can download guidance, you can download the law, you can download all their sample risk assessments, you can download all that for free. They don't charge you for anything. And it's a great resource. And I even go in and check on things from time to time, but it's all there for you. I mean, I have it all anyway, but it's all there for you. Now, they inspect and they prosecute if that's necessary, and they deal with complaints, and they demand a timely response. If they do go into a company and they find something's wrong, they want to know what you're going to do. They'll give you so many weeks to fix it, then they want to come back and make sure you've done it. But they have a job to do. I was on the board of the Health and Safety Authority. I understand how they work, and they have a job to do, and they're reasonable people. And if you cooperate with them, they'll be reasonable with you. But if